Hi, I'm Theo, and these broadcasts are to support the blogs on nomoreshee.com's website as well as the online classes. In this episode, part one of our prophecy series, Prophecy More Than Predictive. Hi, welcome back to the No More She broadcast. Today we want to cover the topic that we've already alluded to before and we've been wanting to get back to for some time. We've been trying to go back to some of the materials that we've been wanting to do. So if you go back to our early videos when we first began the channel, we talked a lot about prophecy, and I want to revisit this, but I need to revisit it for my students' sake, but also for those in our listenership. And so we hope the audience will enjoy these. And we talked about, there's many things that we have said that we want to revisit, and we haven't had a chance to do that because, again, the focus of our channel has been primarily upon producing content for our students to try to show them better ways of thinking, but also better ways to study online. And so we apologize that we're not getting back to topics that we promised early on, and we definitely want to get to those. And so the topic that we want to look at today is the idea of prophecy, and more specifically, biblical prophecy. So the prophetic literature that is inside the biblical corpus. What is going on when we talk about biblical prophecy? And we know that the primary thing that most people think of when we talk about prophecy is prediction. And again, we referred to this in earlier videos, but this is when people come to the biblical text, this is primarily what they think of. So it would seem quite natural when a person, seemingly most students, approach the topic of biblical prophecy, they see it merely as predictive, that something is said in the Bible and later on that thing comes to pass. And that seems for most people at the outset, when they encounter the idea of prophecy in the Bible, that's what's the primary modus operandi, in the sense that this is what's going on. A prophet's primary role is to confirm something by saying that this is going to happen at this time in this manner, and it happens in this time in this manner, and that gives credibility and authorizes the message. And so most people look at biblical prophecy that way. And yet, if one is to stop and think for a moment and look at the literature that we have in the corpus that is prophetic, we begin to see that that's not the primary thing that's going on. And so if we were to look up, for example, prophecy in the dictionary, we go to Webster's dictionary and we can see that under the third line that prophecy is a prediction of something to come. And so that is the primary thinking around most people, that their experience has been, it seems like that. But, and maybe that's just human understanding in our mortal sense, that we lack the fuller understanding. Maybe it's just that we don't understand things very well at the outset, and we just have initial thoughts that once we take a closer look and do a deeper dive, we can see that something else might be going on. You know, if I'm hungry, I'm going to eat something. I'm going to consume something. Something's going to pass my lips and my palate and my tongue and go into my stomach, because I have learned that my stomach is going to cause me to want to consume something. And so I do. And maybe that's, what I'm doing. And I think, well, the reason why I'm eating or consuming is because I'm hungry. And yet, when the body actually does that, what all is going to happen? There are, items I'm going to consume, and the body is going to use some of that for energy to power the systems of my body. It becomes the fuel. But then there's other elements in what I consume that are minerals and vitamin. And so not only is it providing energy, but it's going to different various body parts and providing different functioning for each of those body parts. And certain elements react together differently in interesting ways and benefit the body or harm the body in different ways, depending on what is consumed. So the same thing with prophecy. If we look at prophecy just peripherally as predictive, we're going to miss a lot what's going on. Just as someone who studies the anatomy of a body and studies the effects of consumption and various things that are consumed, and then what happens when the body consumes those things will come away with a lot more detail. And we've said it repeatedly on this channel. It's like trying to explain to a young child where babies come from. There's only so much you can say. When it comes to prophecy, there's so much more going on than simple prediction. So there's often an example that we could turn to, for instance, in Matthew chapter 2, verse 15, where he clearly cites Hosea. Now, there's a whole field of study that goes on in the links between intertextuality, where one part of the Bible seems to rely on another part of the Bible, and what is actually going on here. And so there's multiple levels. Again, like the food or items we consume, there's lots of things going on. And so when Matthew is citing what is in chapter 2, verse 15, according to our enumeration, and then he's citing what is in most people's Bibles as Hosea 11, chapter 11, verse 1. What's going on there? Because, the biblical authors can cite particular passages, and some can have echoes or allusions, and it's a very intricate line of work to discern when one part of the Bible is referring to another and what it intends to imply. And so if we look at prophecy as predictive, then what some people might think is that when the Holy Spirit was dealing with Hosea centuries earlier, Hosea said this so that when Jesus would come, then Matthew would be able to say that Jesus fulfills this prophecy. And we're wondering if that is exactly what's going on, because we have several factors involved in something complex, and I want to take time out to break this down a bit and give us a chance to think about it, because you have Matthew writing, and he's citing something from Hosea, and he's tying it to something that happened to Jesus when Jesus was quite young. And so when, depending on the synoptic studies and depending on when one wants to date the writing of Matthew, what's Matthew's intention of using Hosea? And what's the Holy Spirit trying to do with Matthew? And what does Matthew want to do? Well, Matthew has something in mind to his specific audience that he is writing to. And then when his letter is read to that intended audience, he's expecting something to happen. But then subsequent audiences are going to get something from it. And we are in that group of subsequent audiences nearly 2,000 years later, after the fact that Matthew has written it. What has it meant down through the ages? And there's a whole study of the receptivity of the history of how texts are received and how text came to be from their original form to us. And the original form is going to be oral, Because Matthew is going back to Hosea 11. Well, Hosea is preaching and prophesying. He's saying something to his people in his day. And when he first says it, and then how long after Hosea says it is it recorded? And then after that, we have to look at the reception. And has the text of Hosea then been somehow curated or somehow edited? Because we have Hosea's entire life and his entire ministry. And then we have relatively, I guess, depending on which books you're looking at. If you're looking at Obadiah, Hosea is huge. If you're looking at Isaiah, Hosea is quite small. So what time factors are there involved in the time that Hosea said what he said, in the time that it was written, in the final form as we have it in our Bibles? And how much did the Holy Spirit allow for there to be some flexibility, fluidity, in curating, putting together these aspects of Hosea's life and ministry and what he said, as opposed to what is not there? John says that we didn't get everything that happened with Christ written down because it'd be impossible to record it all. And we have the 4 Gospels that the church has received, and you can go and study the process by which the church chose, and we talked a little bit about that in our series on the canon, of how the church came to understand as God's people and receive certain texts as authoritative over others. And we just briefly surveyed that, and you have to go into the depths of the arguments that went into the thinking behind each book, and each book, how it ended up being received and accepted by some members within belief systems and peoples who believe in these writings as scriptures. And then there are other texts that are received by some that are not received by others, and you have to go through all that. Obviously, so many other discussions could come into play, like the various writings of Paul that did not make it into the book, or different writings even mentioned throughout the biblical corpus, whether those be from sources like the Hebrew Bible, the scriptures of the Old Testament, such as the book of Jasper, one example that is named there that we do not have, although there is a fake copy floating around in the past few centuries, or, the parts of the various writings that come after the New Testament era that have been recently promulgated as possibly having a role and has been discarded, again, by the editing of the Holy Spirit, by the reception of God's people across the spectrum. Not everything that Paul has written has survived or is included because that was deemed to be so. And we don't have everything that each of these people did as if they are a sole authority, but we have what we have because it's been curated for us, brought together, because it is worth saving. And that's what's behind the idea of tradition. The Hebrew scriptures and the Bible itself is nothing more than tradition passed down that began as oral tradition and was preserved for us. And we continue this day to relish those traditions and to learn from them and find the deep riches in their treasures, while understanding that many things did not survive for whatever reason, and the church, God's people, throughout history, or the Holy Spirit decided not to let those be a part of what we have today. And so the point being is we have a problem, because when Hosea said what he said, what did it mean to the audience that Hosea was speaking to? And it was oral. And was Hosea specifically stating that merely for the fact that Jesus was to come? Did Hosea have in his mind baby Jesus, or a small child Jesus being born? And did Hosea get a vision from God of that Jesus? And was that what Hosea is talking about. And some people view it that simply, that that's what happened. But can we seriously think that that's what's going on? And is Matthew just quoting that small section of Hosea only? And that's all Matthew and the Holy Spirit intends for Matthew's audience and us to extrapolate from that reference. Join us next time as we continue our pursuit of prophecy more than predictive in part 2. Thank you very much, and God bless you for listening. Stay tuned for more episodes in videos to help you with your journey from nomorec.com.